Either the club want you or the club want to, sell you on or otherwise. But when you're the agent and the player and you're signing a 7-year deal and don't want to move, then what do? You either ask, well, I'll take 2 years more salary and then we'll go somewhere else, or I'm staying put, I'm on good terms, but it significantly weakens the position of the club. That's always the case. When the player knows that he's got a very long-term deal, then doesn't have to go anywhere. The threat is, putting out onto the bomb squad and not playing matches, but that's the...
Well,
A lot of them don't care, yeah.
this is a lot about Chelsea, really. This almost feels like a bit of a one-off with City, but Chelsea feel as if like they've gone full in for it. They've had a lot of criticism from people like us because we've never really seen it before. Now, do they know something that we don't? Chelsea, that they're the only sort of football club who've sort of done it en masse. Really, it feels like everybody who comes in signs a 7, 8, 9-year deal.
Well, originally, if you remember when they started doing it, I know you've had Kieran on before talking about amortization of the length of the contract, basically. But then the Premier League and UEFA changed it so that you could only amortize the transfer fee and the salary over 5 years. So it stops at that 5-year cut-off point. I'm going to talk about something that hasn't really been discussed before and is the most boring thing you can imagine. But when there's been negotiations done with Chelsea, the actual issue a lot of the time is inflation. So if you imagine the cost of money now is the cost of money in 8 years' time. In 8 years' time, it's a lot less. So actually, unless there's inflation clauses in contracts, which most of the time there are not, that player, unless they're doing a lot better and getting those benchmarks, is on possibly considerably less money in real terms in 8 years' time than they would be right now.
But I wanted to ask you about that because people sometimes say, oh, the player's guaranteed his money for 8 years, let's say. But I used to always think, when I was a player, we used to always sign 4-year deals at Liverpool. And every 2.5 years, you'd be looking to get a new deal. And I'd almost think, I'll back myself, because if I get a new deal, I should get a bit of a jump up in wages. Whereas if you're on the same deal for 7 or 8 years, they can keep you on that for... But that was always my fear. I think...
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking when you're thinking about 8 and 9-year deals. I think when the money is it is now, but you have to take inflation into account, don't you? Because in 5 years time as well, you might be worth more money. If you go the way you want to go. And as you said, we probably signed 5-year deals, and you got to... With 2 years left, it was almost right. We negotiate. If you're doing well, especially, then you are going to expect that. So it's a difficult one as a player as well, I think, to...
And the club's always in control then. In Chelsea's example, the club is always in control because you're never going to get down to 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years when the pressure ramps up.
Unless it's Liverpool. Unless it's Liverpool.
Alex, you want to get involved, don't you, about the situation with Arteta when he first joined the club?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask a couple of things. I think the PSR, because I've heard some rumours about sort of PSR with Arsenal, that we're okay on the Premier League side but not on the UEFA side. And I'd be interested in how that sort of works. And also I'd love to hear about, when Arteta came in. And also the Declan Rice deal, I know you were across that.
3 questions in one.
There you are.
Yeah.
Which ones do you want me to go first?
Up to you.
Here, I'll go PSR and UEFA. So, the rules are basically different. So, Premier League rules is basically you can't lose more than 105 million over a 3-year rolling period. The UEFA rules now are basically squad cost management rules, which is you can't, from next season, it will be you can't spend more than 70% of what you spend on, 70% of revenues of what you spend on agents, on transfers and on wages. So there's a difference there, basically. Second question was Arteta. Yeah, it's the same bit that
It was a bit about when he came in, about trying to get high earners off the books and how that can sort of,
It's exactly the same issue, is that when you've got high earners that are not necessarily performing to the best of their ability on the pitch, how do you incentivize them to leave? And usually the way you incentivize them is to incentivize them by paying them off a certain amount of their contract, which obviously has short-term pain because you're having to account for that quicker than you otherwise would do in terms of settlement. And you're having to incentivize them to leave at the same time when actually for some clubs that want to buy, you're trying to convince them to buy the player, there's no resale value. So the question you get is, do you want to get transfer fee? Maybe, maybe not. How much are you going to have to pay them if they've got 2 or 3 years left on their deal? And are you willing to take that short-term pain in order that you might not be able to spend in that next window or two, knowing later down the line that once that's happened, you can then go again?
And was that a thing in when people talk about managers we always look at Arteta, don't we? And sometimes we look at Jurgen Klopp and say, oh, it took a few years to get going. Is that one of the reasons why, when people look at Arteta and say, oh, we finished 8th twice, was that the reason why they had to take that short-term pain?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, we're approaching a point now as fans where we're sort of going, we're okay to accept that, but then, you know, a couple of years down the line, we're looking at it and we're going, we sort of want to see the fruits of that. I'd love to hear about the Rice deal. I don't know about that.
I was just going to talk on one thing on that bit, which is the two things that make a massive difference to be able to spend decent amounts of money is obviously reducing costs, but it's actually, you know, additional revenue, and usually it's Champions League revenue, and that makes a big difference when, you know, you don't finish Champions League.